In order to see more cleaner, greener, safer and smarter vehicles on our roads today, we need more than just affordable cars that more people can afford to own and maintain. We need battery packs that are cheaper to produce, have longer lifespans, and use less materials for a given amount of range. We need those battery packs to not use materials that come from controversial sources. And we need better charging technology too. I'm here at EVGo's Special Engineering Headquarters, and that means just one thing. We're going to chat to the lovely Jeremy Whaling, and we're going to really do a deep dive into how EV charging stations work, specifically high power charging stations. I'm going to talk to him about the actual process that goes on when you plug your car in, why the charging station might not be giving you the power that you think it should, and plenty more besides. A little warning though, this video is going to be long. Jeremy and I like to talk, and when we both get on camera at the same time, you can guarantee it will be a fun video, but it's going to run long. Jeremy, it is wonderful to be back on camera with you, and this is a lovely test facility.
Oh, thank you.
The first thing that we should probably touch on is the fantastic news that Tesla's supercharger network has opened up to other cars using the fancy Magic Dock.
Yep.
Obviously, you don't work for Tesla and you don't know the inner workings of the Tesla superchargers, but as someone who does work in the industry and knows EV charging inside and out, it would be interesting to ask you some questions about how difficult it is and some of the things that Tesla might be going through right now to try and get their supercharger network, which was previously just for Teslas and Tesla controlled the whole process from start to finish, to now working with pretty much any CCS enabled car on sale here in North America. Because we're hearing some stories that some types of cars are not working.
Or at least not initially. You could have to do multiple attempts. And
it is causing some frustration among EV owners, because EV owners are like, is it the car? Is it Tesla? Is it me? Am I doing something wrong? So maybe,
don't think it's user error this time.
Maybe you could talk us through exactly why these might be happening, why these challenges might be occurring. Because I know that at EVGo, you've experienced almost identical issues every time a new car comes out.
Yeah, so I mean, part of what we do here is interoperability testing, trying to get cars in before they're out in the market. So that way, you know, we catch things early enough so that way it's not in customers' hands, it's not out, the software's not done and dusted. It's still early enough that we can actually do changes, tweaks, things that we need to do to make sure that the cars can be able to charge first time, every time, all that good stuff. So there's that. But Tesla kind of is coming out and doing their Magic Dock. You know, some of these cars are established. They've been in the market, you know, for some time. So they kind of don't exactly have that luxury unless they were already working with them, which maybe they were, maybe they weren't. You know, so there's that whole side of it for Tesla. We do know that the CCS protocol itself is pretty complex. It's got a whole bunch of different layers, and it's pretty much every single layer has its own level of complexity where you go, why did they do it that way? You know, I hate to say it, but very designed by committee for good and bad. You know, it's just good to have many different people's inputs and all that sort of stuff. But
maybe you can tell me a little bit about how CCS has evolved from those very first cars that we saw coming to market in what,
2013,
14?
Yeah. So
that was CCS Type 1. In Europe, you have CCS Type 2. They are not interoperable in some ways.
Some ways they are, in some ways they aren't.
Right.
Why not?
and so can you tell us about that journey? So where are we at now in terms of standards?
So cars today are speaking either a combination of two different standards, basically. So CCS itself, there's a bunch of different standards within different standards organizations that comprise CCS. So like in the Society of Automotive Engineers, which SAE is so basically the North American side of things, where you've got a couple of different J1772, which of course that's a lot of people refer to that for the AC charging plug. There's like a bunch of other and 4 numbers sort of standards that kind of go along with that, that just define like the low level protocol, the high level protocol, what you're saying, when you're saying it, the different timeouts and sort of things like that. All of that kind of comprises in about 2 different standards there. And then you also have the international, the ISO side of things as well. So ISO, IEC, 15118 is, everybody kind of hears that, and that's sort of right now associated with plug and charge, but it itself actually defines a newer version of the high-level protocol that the vehicles are speaking. So some vehicles today will speak what's known as DIN 70121, and that's the 2013, 14 early stuff. That is that standard for the high-level communication. There's no plug and charge capability. We can talk about plug and charge, AutoCharge, all that fun stuff in a little bit, but and just like a basic DC fast charging protocol. Actually, cars today are still, sort of speaking that. There's, of course, vehicles in the market from 2013, 14, so all the chargers have to speak it at that level. But there's also vehicles now today, like your Ford, where they prefer to speak the newer version, which is 15118-2. That's where we got the first, basically, plug-in charge capability with the contract certificates and all that sort of stuff. That sort of gets you to where we kind of are today for passenger vehicles and for basically everything on the road right now. There is the newest version of the 15118 standard. It's 15118-20. It's very, very new. It's coming out, and there's companies, and including EVGo, are working on sort of how we can incorporate that into the mix of how when a vehicle pulls up, how we deal with it and sort of stuff like that. The vehicle will offer, it says, I can speak, DIN 70121, ISO 15118-2, ISO 15118-20, and the station then picks like, oh, okay, well, I speak, DIN 70121 the best, or that's all I speak. Or the vehicle can say, well, I prefer 15118-2. And the station say, oh, you prefer that? Well, I'll pick that. But basically, we're trying to get our stations to always try to speak what the vehicle prefers. And if the vehicle prefers the newer version of the spec, we'll use it.
Your charging stations are almost like polyglots, right?
Yes.
They have all of these different protocols and different variations on a language that they can speak. And it's a bit like the similarity between French and Swiss French and French Canadian. They're all slightly different. They all have slightly different ways of saying numbers, and they have slightly, regional words for different things. And you can get 2 people in the same room who speak technically the same French bit, but exactly the regional dialects would be different. Same for German, same for every language really on the planet. I was speaking to someone recently from Brazil who said that Portuguese language and Brazilian language, although they have that same root, they are different enough that you can have 2 people in the same room, one who speaks Portuguese and one who speaks Brazilian Portuguese, and it is difficult to communicate. So that's what I'm hearing with these charging stations. The evolution of the speed, you kind of rattled off 4 or 5 different protocols that we've had in just a decade.
Yes.
Is this, do you think, something that we're going to see slow down as the networks mature, or do you think that there's always going to be this push for new features, new capabilities?
It depends. I think there's a couple of things. For one, there's newer use cases for CCS. So like, V2X or V2G, V2 Home, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of innovation on that front, and I think there'll be some updates and tweaks and things for that area of the standard. For actual, what we're doing here, the bread and butter of us is just DC fast charging. It's one direction. We're going to pull up to one of our fast chargers and rapidly discharge your vehicle. It doesn't make a lot of sense for us. So I think that area, the fast charging area of the language, is going to mature and basically not require, bunch of newer standards, because we effectively have something that does work. So it can charge cars. The vehicle asks for what it asks for. The station delivers, all that sort of stuff. That area, I think, is not going to see a whole lot of innovation. I think we are going to go to -20 at some point for new vehicles, and for being able to do some stuff around that, especially for the medium and heavy duty with MCS, which is that big connector, that's looking like that's going to use -20 from the get-go. So we'll see that. But otherwise, it's not really like, at the end of the day, the vehicle is asking for a current. The station is saying what its limits are. The vehicle is saying what its limits are. And the station's also reporting, hey, I'm also delivering you this amount of current. And like, that's kind of it.
I think a lot of people have a misconception about how easy it is to charge. And back in the days when electric cars just plugged in with a kettle lead, my first electric car had a 3-pin frog. I think a lot of people get very confused about how easy or difficult it is to charge an electric vehicle. And that's partly because back when EVs were first coming to market, many of them came like with a 3-pin plug on it that you just plugged into a wall outlet. And it was just a standard household outlet and the vehicle just charged.
Yeah.
Today, even with portable granny leads, EVSEs, you just plug them into a wall and then you plug it in. And we're aware that there is a little bit of communication between that. But
it's very simple.
With a rapid charging station, we're not talking about low power levels. So maybe tell us a little bit about the actual process of plugging in. What happens between you parking up in front of a charging station and pulling away again?
Yeah, well, we'll start with the AC charging. So AC charging, J1772, the station basically just advertises with 12 volts, and sort of the car goes, oh, okay, there's a station, I'm plugged into a station now. And the vehicle will change the resistance on that pilot line and bring down the voltage a bit. That way the station knows, hey, there's a vehicle connected. It will do the pulse width modulation, and that advertises how much current's available. Because to a vehicle, if you just had straight AC from the wall, you wouldn't know, well, what's the rest of the circuit coming back from the vehicle all the way back to the grid, right? So the station has to be able to say at least, hey, I'm a 32 amp, 12 amp, whatever. And the vehicle can then go, okay, I'm not going to draw more than that. The other thing with that square wave that you get is that there's a diode in the vehicle, and the way they do the square wave is there's actually a negative voltage and a positive voltage. So if you just drop the cord in a puddle of water and somehow magically got the right resistance, the cord's not going to go live, right? So the cord is always, it's not energized unless it's in a vehicle. So there's the safety aspects of that, the communication, but that's kind of it. That's AC. It's very, very simple. It's actually basically too simple, because the station never gets to know, well, what kind of vehicle is connected? How much charge do they need? Do they just need to top up? Do they want 6 hours? Do they want 100 kilowatt hours? Do they need 10? None of that data is conveyed. So there's actually some thought and some stuff going on where we actually use some higher level communication there to get additional data, and actually do plug and charge on AC charging as well. So there is actually a facet of the CCS communication standard where you can actually do that with AC as well. We'll sidestep the rest of it because it gets pretty complicated and all that sort of stuff. But basically, that's AC charging. DC charging, obviously, there's a lot more. You can't just have, oh, well, I have 100 amps available of current. Hey, I want 100 amps of current. You need to do a bunch of different things. For one, you have to do digital communication. You have to do a higher level communication to get basically higher bandwidth so you can send packets of data. CCS communication has two different levels to it. The low level is that square wave again. So we still have that square wave on there, but it's fixed at what's known as a 5% duty cycle. That just says, hey, you need to use digital communications to do the rest of what you need to do. But it's there also as a safety interlock. So if the connector were somehow removed from the vehicle or dropped in a puddle of water or whatever, it's not going to start trying to talk to the puddle of water. It's not going to energize or anything like that. But also, if you disconnect with DC, and I encourage you to look into some of the videos online. If you actually have DC and if you were to disconnect while live, you would create a serious arc and a serious safety hazard. So that loss of communication needs to be rapid. And so the square wave is there really for that rapid communication loss. Something needs to do a low-level shutdown immediately. We actually make our charging stations shut down from that type of signal in less than 30 milliseconds. It's part of the specifications for CCS, but we've actually seen non-compliance across all of our different manufacturers that we've had to do sometimes, mostly software updates, but occasionally hardware updates to get that safety side of it. So we're very diligent about making sure that works. So that's the safety, low-level stuff. The high-level stuff, once you connect, it sees the 5%. The vehicle actually, there's a handshake known as Slack, which is basically setting up the communication between the vehicle and the station. And that what it creates, it's using a protocol called Power Line Carrier, or PLC. It's not as popular elsewhere these days. It was kind of a thing before Wi-Fi, where you could have two plugs where you plug in one here, plug there, and it would do communication over your power lines to give you like Ethernet. That's really what it was originally made for. It's been reused here because it can go over one wire of the pilot wire and actually provide communication. So it provides about a 6 megabit maximum channel between the vehicle and the station. It basically sets up like a virtual Ethernet channel. And from that, once that's set up, then the vehicle does this general ping, which is known as SDP, or SECC Discovery Protocol. Basically just a broadcast packet saying, hey, I'm looking for the station at the high level, the IP address basically of the station. And the station responds, oh yeah, I'm here, here's where you connect to, da 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 da. And then they basically establish a TCP connection. And then right at that first establishment, they say, okay, what do you want? The vehicle says, I can speak these protocols. The station says, cool, I'm going to pick this protocol, whether it's, there's different logic on stations, whether they say, oh, I only speak DIN, or I speak ISO, or da 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 da. By the way, I am bypassing for now for simplicity and Cliff Notes sake, some of the plug and charge stuff actually starts with that SDP. We're going to skip that for simplicity for now.
I am glad you just said that, Jeremy, because we have engineers who watch this channel a lot.
Yes.
And I know that someone would have said, oh, you're not saying blah, blah,
Yes.
blah.
The Cliff Notes is that initial handshake with that broadcast packet, the vehicle actually requests a secure connection or a non-secure connection. So if you go the secure route, that's where plug and charge starts, really. And there's a TLS handshake. Otherwise, we're going to skip plug and charge for now for everybody.
So again, this is really important from a security point of view. It means that if your car is going to say, hey, my name is this and I belong to this person, please bill this account, all of that billing stuff is happening over TLS, which is, again, the same kind of encryption layer that you use when you're doing online banking, when you're doing any kind of secure web browsing. So it's a secure connection, so someone can't pretend to be the charging station and pull that data out easily.
Yes.
They probably could if they were really, really determined to, but that would be quite obvious at a charging station.
They got a whole crew and equipment and everything. Like, they've been there for hours or something. Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty heavy and complex. It's not heavy in terms of like, banking website stuff, but in terms of embedded electronics, it is pretty heavy. So we're going to skip some of the TLS stuff and all the plug-in charge stuff. But anyway, so assuming that you're either doing AutoCharge or you're doing, RFID, credit card, all that sort of stuff, app start, that's going to happen through just regular non-TLS communication, at least on EVGo for now. So once you have that initial, you have set up Slack, that sets up your virtual Ethernet channels, I like to call it. You do the SDP, you find the charger, you do your initial protocol setup. So the vehicle basically says I can speak these languages. The station says, okay, great, I'm picking this one, and then we continue from there. There's a couple of different little setup things from there. For the basic stuff, it's just kind of like formalities. There's just kind of a back and forth for session ID and EVCC ID and sort of stuff like that. And then you get to a point called contract authentication, or in the newer standards called authorized. And it's a ping pong back and forth where the station and the vehicle are communicating, but they're not doing anything else other than waiting for you to pay. So we always say plug in first, because that's how our AutoCharge and plug in charge with our automakers works. But if you don't have those, and basically the station has determined, hey, I don't know who this car is, I don't know the account that they're associated with, we have our payment screen pop up, and that's where you're basically, asked to, we have little glyphs that just show you, like, here's how different ways you can pay. Basically there, you're just sitting back and forth, you're ping-ponging the state, everything's established, but that's all that's happening. And that actually there, I would like to point out is one of our big failings, is that in the standards for it, they basically allow you 60 seconds in ISO 15118-2, or DIN, it's not as exactly defined, but basically 90 seconds. And that's not long enough. So we've actually talked to automakers here. They say, hey, we want you to have this timeout here longer, because the vehicle can say, okay, I've waited forever, I'm going to just shut the communication off. And from there, we need to basically say to the customer, hey, you need to unplug and replug in. And it seems kind of ridiculous.
And they will blame you.
Of
I mean,
course.
that's the other important thing, right? So the reason why I've asked you to go quite in depth into this is so that people understand it's not just the charging station is broken, which is what is a common complaint that we hear.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not connecting, it's broken, let's try again. But if you've only got 60 seconds after you've plugged your car in,
Yeah.
because all of that stuff you just covered, it might have taken us 10 minutes to cover, but it literally happens in
About 10 seconds.
about 10 seconds,
Yeah.
right? So being able to be ready to have your payment method as you plug in
Yeah.
will increase the likelihood that your charging session will just start.
We've seen this with our AutoCharge customers where the success rate is significantly higher. And it's the same, we can compare basically same vehicle to same vehicle. And we're going, there's quite a bit of success improvement here that's that we're, obviously we love it's convenient for the customer as well for the vehicle to do the authentication, right? So that way you don't have to do anything but plug in. But obviously, for some customers, either they don't, they don't use rapid charging all that often, or, for many different reasons, people are not signing up in droves. We did get a lot of people that started, like they're active users, rideshare drivers, or people just for whatever reason, using us as their primary charging method, they signed up right away. So we got a lot of the folks that, are charging a lot, have more convenience for them because obviously they're charging a lot. So any sort of impact of like having to fiddle with RFID and stuff is it's nice to be able to not have to do that.
So we've got to the payment. We're going to assume that the payment bit works within that 60-second window.
Yes.
What happens next?
So the station will reply in one of those ping pongs that says EVSE processing finished. And the vehicle is actually basically in charge of the every message that we send, or the vehicle sends the first message, we send the reply. So every time, it's back and forth where the vehicle is always sort of in charge of the communication. So we say, okay, we're done. The next message that comes in is charge parameter discovery. So charge parameter discovery says, okay, well, I'm a vehicle. Here's my different parameters for charging in terms of the minimums are maximum voltage and maximum current from the vehicle. But usually they'll have a bit more. You can have maximum power and some of the different other, status sort of things that are like, by the way, I'm running my battery cooling. I've got climate inside running, which is kind of like, doesn't really matter for us, but it's optional and it can be there. And some vehicles actually send it. So what we found actually for this, the charge parameter discovery, is that the vehicles in the market, it's kind of like a fingerprint. It's not every vehicle itself is unique, but models themselves will have different, like the Ford F-150 Lightning versus, a Bolt versus, pick any other CCS vehicle in the market, or, even Tesla and stuff like that. With the CCS adapter, they all have that part of it is actually fortunately not standard, because we've found that that's a fingerprint. We can actually identify the vehicle even if they don't have a customer account. So, but anyway, the vehicle sends its parameters, the station replies with its parameters. And as long as everything looks good to the vehicle, it continues on. Now we can actually sit in this area as well for some amount of time, because sometimes with different chargers, if it's a high voltage vehicle or a low voltage vehicle, the station actually has to prepare the modules for what's coming. So basically going, okay, I need to put my modules in low voltage mode or put them in high voltage mode for this, or I need to do some calculations of how many modules. So it's, basically we don't want to time out the session or anything. So there's a back and forth again. You can ping pong. Some stations there isn't. It's like one and done. Others it's 1-2 seconds. Some other ones, if the station has not been charging a vehicle lately, it'll be asleep, and so all the modules will be off to conserve power. So the modules have to boot. And with that, there's a little bit of back and forth while those modules boot up, 10, 15 seconds or so. So there's that. And then once you're done with that, the EVSE says, okay, I'm done processing. You go to the next step, which is cable check. And for cable check, the vehicle doesn't really do anything. It just says, hey, I'm asking when cable check is done. The station is replying, yeah, I'm still working on it, or hey, I'm done. And so that is where basically we put a high voltage on the cable to ensure integrity of the cable, and do what's an isolation monitoring setup, where basically you're looking to see if there's anything wrong. It won't go all the way to the battery pack, but it'll go all the way to the vehicle inlet and the vehicle, but also all the way to the contactors within the vehicle that actually connect the battery to the fast charger. So basically one side of those contactors will be energized to just make sure, okay, there's no funny stuff here. You do have to provide some voltage to make sure that you can see it. Basically, we've done different testing where we put like a fixed resistor and like caused an intentional fault, and you do have to actually get the voltage up there to see it. So all the different chargers, EVGo or not, usually put it, about 400, 500 volts on the cable just to ensure integrity of the cable and of the vehicle, all that sort of good stuff. Once that's done, you go into pre-charge. And pre-charge is where the vehicle says, this is my actual pack voltage. This is what I need in order for you to, for me to say, okay, we're going to start charging. So the station will bring up a power module or power modules up to the voltage of the battery pack, the actual volt, 350.2 volts, whatever it is, bring it up to that. And then from there, once the station says, okay, I'm at this voltage, it's the car's decision basically to say, okay, I'm actually going to close the contactors, and does what the next message would be power delivery request, which is, hey, I need to turn on the rest of your power modules. We're about to start charging. The station says, yep, I'm good to go. And then you actually get the first current demand request, which is charging. So the current demand request is basically the station and the vehicle going back and forth with, okay, I'm requesting a current, the vehicle requests a current, and the station says, okay, I'm delivering this much current. And by the way, here's my maximums. Vehicle also says, by the way, here are my maximums. And those maximums are supposed to be basically right now, as it stands, here's what I can do for you, sort of thing, in terms of maximums. Because there's the earlier ones, which is really just to make sure that we're going to be able to charge, right? Like you don't have something weird, I don't have something weird. But the ones in the session itself are basically like, we can talk about the dynamic power sharing sort of things. It's like, okay, well, I have this many modules for you, or my grid conditions are such and such that I'm limited to this much power, that sort of thing. And that's charging.
The battery management system within the vehicle is responsible for saying, hey, can I have this much current?
Yeah, so usually it varies the vehicle side of things, but basically the battery controller, the battery management system says its limits. There's usually at least a dedicated module that actually does the talking to the station. So there's like an internal communication, usually CAN messages back and forth saying like, okay, you can ask this much from the station. And the controller then goes, okay, I'm going to ask the station, hey, station, I need this much. So there's a little bit of hopping back and forth inside. Varies by vehicle and all that sort of stuff. Doesn't matter too much. But basically, yes, that's how it works.
And that's why it's difficult sometimes to get those charging sessions to work. And I think it's really important
there's a lot of steps.
For first-time EV owners using the charging stations. It's very exciting. We have a family member today who has just gone out and purchased a brand new electric car. Yay them.
Yay.
Chevrolet Bolt EUV. Yay. I think it's a great choice for them, actually.
Yeah.
They've gone out and purchased their first electric car, and later today they've got to drive like 500 miles back home with this car and use rapid charging infrastructure for the first time. And I think it's going to be really interesting to hear about their experiences, because with a gas pump, it literally is press the button for regular or premium, make sure you've paid. If you're doing a prepay pump, you put your credit card in, and then you just hold the nozzle in, and that's it. Or you, in Oregon and New Jersey, you have someone do it for you.
Yes.
But it's a very different experience. And while there are safety protocols in the gas pump industry, it's nowhere near as complex as what you all have to deal with.
Well, to give them credit, there's more time that they've had in their industry to do a whole bunch of, there is a bunch of safety stuff, I think, and this is, I'm not a petrochemical engineer, obviously, but basically there's a whole bunch of stuff around safety valves, shutoffs,
vapor and all that other
all
good
that
stuff.
sort of stuff. Yeah. And if you look back in the early days of the gasoline industry, the pumps looked way different, right? They had a big jar of the gasoline, and it was a gravity fed. Tanks underground was totally not a thing. And the reason why they had cleared containers for their stuff is you can actually, if you have water in your gasoline, it separates out and you could see it. So like water sinks to the bottom, water is more dense than gasoline. And so if you have a gravity fed, it's going to go water into your tank first, and that's really bad, right? So you need to be able to see and dispose of that sort of stuff. That was the early days then for them. Now today, they have what you described. So and that's 100+ years of innovation to do that, 120, something like that.
And you've made incredible innovation in what amounts to maybe 15 years of rapid charging.
Yeah.
One thing that people often ask us is, I have a insert name of car here, and I'm really frustrated because I went to name of charging network, and my car is capable of charging at 85 kilowatts, and I plug in and it only does 30.
Yes.
Can you explain some of the reasons why that might be happening?
Yeah, so I'll start with some of the easier ones here. If you're charging on, say, a 50 kilowatt machine, the 50 kilowatt machines, and you have a 350 kilowatt vehicle or something like that, they'll work, but obviously there's a physical limitation of the station just can't provide a certain power level that you would maybe expect. So there's sort of that. That's an easy one, right? Part of that too is that a station has a current limit, a voltage limit, and a power limit. So if you're at a 50 kilowatt station, you're like, but my car's capable of, 175, 350 kilowatts, something like that, but I'm only getting 39, 40, 42. What's going on? It should just give me the full 50, right? Well, a lot of 50 kilowatt machines are 125 amp cable, power module, whatever, 125 amp limited. And so if you have a low voltage battery, that's 400 volts, you can do the math, 400 volts times 125 amps, and that's not 50 kilowatts. When you get up to 450 volts, you actually do get closer and closer to 50 kilowatts. And that's where some of those vehicles in the market can truly almost get 50 kilowatts out of a 50 kilowatt machine. And then, of course, there's the complexity of the high voltage vehicles, how they can then work with some of the lower power chargers. But sort of thing, obviously, there's some cases where it's like, yeah, you're not going to get magically more power out of this than the machine can deliver. The machine has some of these different limitations, which are not, super easily explainable to everybody in a one sentence or less sort of thing. So that's just kind of the industry right now, the physics of how this works. Current limits are because there's physical properties of copper, and being able to provide that current, the more current you provide, the more physical copper and stuff you need to have versus a voltage. 400 versus 450, the charger's built basically the same because it goes up to either 500 or about 1,000 volts. And so there's no real difference in cost there. So there's that. The vehicle sometimes may, in theory, on paper, be capable of a certain power level, but the battery essentially is not, at this moment in time, able to do that. And there's a couple of different reasons why, basically the main one that I've seen is that in winter conditions, colder conditions, you have the battery pack is at a lower temperature. When it's at a lower temperature, the chemistry is not as active and fast and moving of the physical ions in the lithium ion battery. Therefore, you can't move the lithium ions faster or you'll cause battery damage, or it just won't happen. And so there's limitations there in terms of temperature. What we've seen with later vehicles now is that they'll heat the pack, or we have, you can select a charging station on the way. Hey, I'm going to this charging station. It's this far away. There's different algorithms in terms of heating the pack up so that way it's ready to go. It's able to charge faster and stuff like that. If you don't do that, or your vehicle's not capable of doing that, and it's cold, and you may have that limitation of it. So that's the main one for at least for vehicles where the station's fine, but the vehicle is just at this moment in time can't do it. There's also during charging as well. If you've been charging at a certain speed and the battery pack is getting now too hot, that there's derating that can happen, and some vehicles are more graceful about it, less graceful about it. Fortunately for those vehicles that are derating, we're seeing messages in the cabin where it says like, hey, vehicle is due to temperature, sort of stuff like that. If you're interested in a particular model, you go find the YouTube channels where the people are doing charge tests and all sorts of different crazy things with their vehicles. All the techies are getting all this sort of data on that sort of side of limitations as well. And that sort of the station's just, okay, well, the vehicle's asking for less current. For both those cases, the vehicle is asking for less current. We can't deliver more current than what they're asking
that
for.
Would be
right?
That would be unsafe,
that would be
right?
bad. Yeah. So the other side limitation is charger related. And so there's basically two different facets of the charger related one. One is that if we're on a system where it's power shared, so we have our newer stations actually can do multiple vehicles at a time using a set of either power cabinets or a power cabinet individual. And that then what happens is that there's actually those modules, those power modules are broken up into, it's not one big, say 350 kilowatt module. It's broken down into smaller chunks of, 25, 12, whatever kilowatts. And those modules have contactors where they can move between either cables on one dispenser or between dispensers. And so if you're basically sharing equipment with another vehicle, well, then you can't get 350 into one because the other vehicle will get 0. So there is some level of power sharing that happens. If you're the second vehicle that comes in, you're getting the remainder, and that may not be what you expected. And there's a lot of things there for opportunities for us to both communicate to the customer that, hey, this power is limited because of, it's sharing with another one. Looking at the dynamic limits, providing those dynamic limits so hey, the station is limited to X right now, you're getting Y, and Y is pretty close to X, so you're getting what you can. The station's not broken, this is Y. The other, of course, is that there's something wrong with the station preventing the full power, whether there's a number of modules that are offline, out of service, broken, whatever, or that there's a cable limitation. So are the cables in the market today that go up to 500 amps and stuff, they're actually liquid cooled. The ones we use a dielectric oil. There's a heat exchanger and a system that actually circulates that oil, cools the cable and cools the pins, and actually is able to bring the temperature down. You can use less copper for a given amperage that you need, and that way you don't need to have superhuman strength to move around this cable. But with that, the opportunity of, okay, well, we have this lighter cable, it's got this cooling system, there's more points of potential failure, and we've seen where, okay, the cooling system is offline. There is an cooling system offline, cable is not cooled, but can still charge vehicles, but it's significantly lower than what people are expecting. And that, again, is an opportunity for showing on the screen that, hey, I'm limited this much right now. And, maybe providing some details why. There's a balance between how much detail you provide there, but basically just saying like, hey, I'm limited and this is why. I think that's very useful for people as well.
I think it's really important as someone's heading to a charging station, especially if they're doing a long distance road trip, and we've done 1,600 miles in 3 and a bit days, being able to plan your journey, the difference between rocking up at a charging station and being able to use 170 kilowatt charging for the majority of your session before it slows down at the end of the charging. And of course, what we haven't noted is that as a battery pack gets fuller, it physically can no longer safely accept high current. So it starts to ramp down. And that's a car thing, and the battery management and the communications on the vehicle side. But it's very important on a long distance trip to know, hey, that charging station that you thought was super powerful is actually not feeling very well. And it will still charge your car at a push, but it's going to take you another 30 minutes or whatever. In terms of communication, one of the biggest challenges for network providers is this interoperability, this ability to share data about the status of charging stations, where your charging stations are, whether they're in use, whether they're not in use. Do you think that is something that's going to become better in the US and around the world? Obviously, part of the government's push for electric vehicle charging infrastructure, there are requirements that providers must publicly share their data on operational status. There's also a push for charging networks to be more reliable.
Yeah.
How does that all tie into the future from the engineering side of things?
We actually share our real-time network status with a number of different with the roaming partner. We roam with ChargePoint, so they have real-time status in their app. For our chargers, we have real-time status for their chargers in our app as well. So there's that. But we also do with PlugShare. Obviously, EVGo owns PlugShare, but we keep those two companies basically separated enough that we actually just have an OCPI link, which is Open Charge Point. Sorry. Well, I just call it OCPI. I forgot my head.
Yeah,
it's not my area of expertise, but basically the back-end system to back-end system standard that basically can provide data on like a streaming style of service where basically, hey, here's all your charging stations. Here's, different chargers are going out, charging, they're going into, like preparing, or they're not available, they're faulted, whatever. Part of it, though, the real-time status, though, is also the charger itself reporting properly whether it's good or not good or limited. And part of that's the OCPP side of the house, Open Charge Point Protocol. That's my domain as well. So that being able to make sure we're consistent in terms of like, okay, the charger has had this many problems, needs to be taken out of service, needs to be fixed, reporting that properly so that way somebody doesn't go up, the station looks fine, I plug in, it doesn't work, I plug in again, doesn't work, okay, it's broken, okay, I call the call center, okay, I'm gonna go try the other one. Like that extends the amount of time that you're trying to get charging. Your vehicle is sitting there not charging, you're wasting time. It's very frustrating from a customer perspective. So having the chargers at least say like, hey, I'm not available, when we know with certainty that like it's not, it's just not working, that's certainly one thing. The standards all cover that today between the station, our back end to others. The I'm working, but I'm kind of limited side of the things, that's not as well defined in the standards, but that's something we're still working on. And at least reporting, at least on the screen of the charger, is really important to do that. So we're working heavily on trying to make sure that we, for one, making sure that the chargers are very reliable, that they can report to the customer, hey, this is the state that I'm in right now. So that way there's less confusion. If you've got a bank of 6 of them and one of them is derated, but 5 others are available, maybe like, oh, that's too bad, I'm going to use this one and not have any problems, then basically it's no impact to the customer, right? Versus, oh, I'm trying to bunch, oh, I'm actually charging slow, wait, I've got to move, oh, wait, somebody's coming in right now. Like, you get very frustrating very quickly. So we do see that. So we want to try to make sure we reduce that as much as we can and inform the customer. The next thing is then the long-term reliability and sort of the metrics around some of the federal funding and different state grants, all those sort of different things around, percentage uptime. That's a little bit out of my wheelhouse. All the details of all those sort of things. There's, that the NEVI documentation is, hundreds of pages. So, but there's basically, it sort of folds into the real-time status as well, is that like, okay, you have it down, but why is it down? Is it a charger problem? Is it vandalism? Is it, network connectivity? Is it something else? Do you have a software bug? What's going on? So there's some of that metrics, and that helps define some of the uptimes for those. Obviously, again, reporting proper data from the station to our backend is super important. So that way we can then have our awesome data scientists, compile all of that for the entities that require it. This sort of data, though, is not normally public. It's not something that we usually say publish and stuff. We strive towards 98% uptime, all that sort of different things. But some of that verges on sort of the proprietary on certain charger models or certain areas and all that sort of thing. And that's why that's maybe not as publicly available. Obviously, the real time for drivers is super important, but yeah.
To finish off our very nerdy technical discussion, and I know you and I and Kate and everybody else here, we could talk all day, but we have to head back to Portland.
Yes.
We want to talk to you about a technology that EVGo has developed that brings plug and charge capability to non-plug and charge cars. Now, earlier on in our video, you were talking about that massive protocol exchange that happens during a rapid charging session, the different languages that are spoken, and part of that is plug and charge, which is a newer part of some of the most recent communication protocols. But there are lots of cars on the market, cars like the Chevrolet Bolt EV, even the Chevrolet Bolt EUV,
yes,
which don't speak the more recent languages. They speak the older languages. And yet, EVGo has been rolling out and testing something called AutoCharge.
Yes.
Disclaimer, I have AutoCharge because you told me to put it on my cars and I did, so thank you. Both my Chevrolet Bolt and my F-150 have AutoCharge on, and it doesn't use plug and charge.
Yes.
But the experience to the end user is the same.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Sure. So AutoCharge is basically using a unique fingerprint in the vehicle known as the MAC address, which is, for most EVs on the road today, not everyone, is unique. And so is able to, globally unique, and is able to be used basically as an authentication means. So we have that. We also have some stuff along with that help make sure that it is secure, because some have claimed that basically the MAC address itself is not it's not the certificates, it's not the TLS and sort of things like that. One thing we're doing is just doing some reality checks in terms of, okay, you're starting a session, wait, you just had a session over here, or you actually have another session going over here. You can't have 2 vehicles that have the same MAC address. by definition so, then we basically stop those sessions and report it to the customer and stop that vehicle from auto charging. If somebody were to somehow clone your address. We also look at geolocation. For some of our automakers, we actually have more, we can report, hey, this vehicle started at this location. It's roughly this thing. Does that sound right to you? Because there's telematics in the vehicle and the vehicle can report its location. So we do some back and forth to make sure that we're good to go there. But we also have, again, additional security around just being able to properly handle the MAC address in a secure way in our backend stuff. And also just doing a lot of different checks on terms of like, is this really the vehicle that we think it is? So
from a user perspective, when
Yes.
you register for AutoCharge, you can use the EVGo app to enter in the details of your car.
Yes.
And when you first go to an EVGo station that has AutoCharge capabilities,
Yes.
you say, hey, I want to start charging, and the app then pops up, hey, do you want to enroll in AutoCharge?
Yes.
You have to physically plug your vehicle in after you've told it to start the session, or the other way around. I can't remember which way around it is. And then at that point, the station reads that hardware MAC address, which is basically a series of hexadecimal numbers, all jumbled together. This, again, it's the same as you get in networking. If you are a computer person and you're sufficiently into computers, you will know that every network interface card has its own MAC address. And yes, you can spoof MAC addresses, as you said, but it's, again, very
a lot harder on the vehicle
complex to do, and you can't do it on a vehicle as easily.
Yeah.
So basically, when you enroll your car in the service, you tell the app, which is securely connected to your network, hey, I'm about to plug in at this charging station with this vehicle. You plug in, the network obviously initiates the charging, and in the back end, the charging station is reading the fingerprint of the car.
Yeah.
And the next time that car plugs in, it goes, oh, I recognize this car. It belongs to this person.
Yeah.
So we can bill them.
Yeah. It basically, there's some of the little technical details there, but basically, yes, that's how it works. Is the station's always reporting back the MAC addresses of the vehicles plugging in, and so we can tell, okay, you plugged in at this time here. This is your MAC address, and then start your charging in the future, same sort of way. So.
As far as I know, you're the only network to do that right now.
Fastned, and I believe some others. Fastned in Europe is one that also, it's the same. They have on their website, they show which vehicles are capable of it and which ones are not, because there are some vehicles where that MAC address is not a unique fingerprint. It's basically the same thing, and it's a standard that it is out there. It is publicly available as a standard, but that's essentially what we do today. As far as the charger implementation, the smartest, and the logic and the telematics stuff, that's all the EVGo side of things.
And I'm just going to throw in another question because I know that other people are going to want me to. Can you tell me what EVGo's commitment to CHAdeMO vehicles looks like? I know that you have a connection to CHAdeMO because you've been in the industry long enough to remember that from the...
Oh, yeah.
There was a time when that was the only charging standard for rapid charging in North America. Obviously, other networks are reaching a point where they're not putting CHAdeMO on their charging stations. And in some locations, there's one.
Yes.
And there's a point of failure, single point of failure.
Of course, right? Yeah.
It's something that EVGo doesn't appear to be doing as much. So can you tell me a little bit about that decision to try and keep CHAdeMO active across the network?
So I can say today we still are installing stations with it, and that over time, this is a hard one for me.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah, it's just, I'll start over. So I can say that today we're still installing stations with CHAdeMO, but over the long term, as the vehicles in the market, new vehicles basically won't come with it anymore. Nissan has said that they are moving to CCS for the Aria. Even I don't know what's, the Leaf, how many more years is it going to go? But basically, once the Leaf is kind of off the market, there'll be basically no BEVs with CCS no BEVs with CHAdeMO still being manufactured as new vehicles. You'll just be supporting the vehicles in the market. over time, we're going to see, those vehicles age out and, over, long years, right? Aging out. At some point, though, it's not going to make a lot of sense to install CHAdeMO. I don't have any sort of definitive timelines to give you on this, but we still are actively deploying today. I will say that one thing we do at our newer sites is we'll have usually a combination of 350 kilowatt charging. Some of that actually does include CHAdeMO, but some of it doesn't. And we could, in our tour, we'll go over the different models and what's going on there. But we tend to put in a 100 kilowatt machine, usually two 100 kilowatt machines that have CCS CHAdeMO on them. And for all the CHAdeMO vehicles in the market, that's it. 100 kilowatts, it's 500 volts, 200 amps. It's pretty much it for everything. It can charge all those vehicles. It can charge Teslas with the CHAdeMO adapter, or we do have a couple of them with the built-in Tesla adapter, so they can charge without any adapters and all that good stuff. Fine. But long term, we sort of all know the writing on the wall. It's CCS for better or worse, and that's where we're all headed. And so at some point we will, have installed our last CHAdeMO station, but I don't know truly when that date exactly is at this moment in time. But we do have our partnership with Nissan. We do have a lot of CHAdeMO stations available to us. We continue to repair, if they have problems and stuff, we continue to repair them and continue to support them. We're not going to certainly rip out functioning CHAdeMOs and put in CCS. That doesn't make sense. So that's, I think, is as good of an answer as I can give.
Jeremy, thank you so much.
No problem.
And I'm really looking forward to seeing what EVGo and the charging industry as a whole can bring to increase reliability, increase accessibility, and also make charging as ubiquitous as everything else we expect in our modern world today. Thank you.
Thanks.
And on that note, we are done with today's video. If you liked it, you know what to do, and feel free to let us know your thoughts in our Discord chat room by reaching out to us on Mastodon. Or if you are a Patreon supporter, you can leave a comment at our Patreon page. If you do want to see more from this channel, including an upcoming tour from Jeremy, subscribe, hit the bell, and follow the links below to regularly support us with a YouTube membership or a Patreon subscription. You'll also find links to our Ko-fi, Bitcoin, and Swag store, as well as that aforementioned Mastodon server. It's pretty cool. Scrolling on my right is the list of amazing charged up supporters, and shout outs go out to our self-driving tier supporters. They are Mike Weeder, Denny Hyde, Linda Irish, Lance Schlall, Mark Eggleton, Cyprian Laplace, John Trammell, Alan Tupper, Chris Maxwell, Brian Newton, Bennett Elder, Andrew Martin, Sean Tucker, Pedro Mura Pinheiro, Carl Hodgson, Tony Moss, Brophy Wolf, Kyle Fox, Hey Esker, Taslet in the Gong, Dan Blair, Peter Dillinger, Gordon C., Stefan Fremgen, Stephen Williams, Regine Fellows, Chris Centaur, and Jim Vaness. And finally, out of this world, thanks to our top tier supporters. They are John L. Henderson, Clay Witt, CPU Freak 101, John Lyons, Kevin Burrowbridge, Andrew Glenn, Joe Hughes, Dave Kitchen, Joe Bresney, Nigel S., Matthew Drobnak, Eric Knack, Paul Conway, Stephen O'Donoghue, JP Fagerback, Reggie Watts, Marcel Ward, Robert Flannery, Aaron Hahn, Rory Litwin, Ellery Hensley, Will Graylin, and of course, Ian. Don't forget that we make videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday over on this channel, the main one. Plus, on Take 2, you will find our Sunday Musings and Chicken and Garden update every weekend. And with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I will see you soon, and as always, keep evolving.